see if I... There we go.
Hi. Thanks for coming on here with me, Judith.
Hi, Melissa.
So I'm coming to you guys from my daughter's room. And so you see some of her furniture in the background, but let that not distract you. At least you have a pretty unicorn to look at for now. And then the box of her bed, which I need to construct. So here we are. We have the great Judith Hill here, who is wearing very happy green colors. I'm digging the green. It's saying happy holidays.
Also, the color of that relaxes is the color of peace and calm and balance.
That's true. All shades of green, they actually do that. That's why it's good for people to spend time in green space. There's a big correlation between green and joy. So, wonderful. Judith, you are launching a new class in February.
Yes.
And I'm really excited about this one because this will now complete the 6-spoked wheel that we have at the Academy. I guess first I should probably introduce who I am. I'm Melissa Beam. I'm the director for the Academy for Astrological Medicine. And I mean, you don't need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce you anyway. We have the great Judith Hill, who is a legend, a modern pioneer in medical astrology, and who's come out with who's published over 13 books. And we have another one that's soon going to be coming out within the next couple months that we're very excited about. It's called The 12 Zodiac Sign Syndromes. And it is, I mean, I might be biased on this one, but it's probably your best book to date.
Thank you.
Can we talk a little bit more about the book, just for people who don't know about it?
Yeah, sure. The full title is The 12 Zodiac Sign Syndromes of Medical Astrology, Expanding Our View of the Seasonal Wheel.
And I love this title, and I love this book. I have the great honor of assistant editing this book alongside Mark Foley, and it was such a joy for me to read that I read it 3 times. It was part of the editing process, but I was really my mind was blown when I read this book because in studying, I was first an herbalist before I became an astrologer. And in studying herbalism, there's different modalities that you study. There's the branch of Ayurveda, which is a different form of medicine that originated in the Vedas in India over 5,000 years ago. And that's a form of medicine where they look at the human through the lens of the 3 doshas, the 3 different body types, and they correlate those to the elements. And there's also is it the 4 or the 5 humors?
The 4 humors, yes.
The 4 humors, and that also is correlated to the elements, but also to temperature. And we have other forms of medicine where people have a lens of looking at the body. What Judith did with this book is that you essentially established a new system of medicine where we're looking at the body through the 12 zodiac signs and through common ailments or common predispositions that someone with a prominent placements in those zodiac signs are more likely to either look like or exhibit.
Yes, there actually are 12 zodiac sign types, and they are conflations of elements, modes, planets, seasons, and they have 12 distinct medical portraits that the medical astrologer witnesses over and over and over again. And I've been doing this so long, I thought, well, I'm going to start making this, putting this down on paper. And I didn't really realize that this is what happened until I was done writing the book, which I was writing chapters for a class I was giving with Matthew Wood, which we have on the Academy, of the 12 medical sun signs and their herbs. It's a wonderful class, 12-part class. But when I was all done with all these chapters, I thought, oh my goodness, these are actually 12 types. But the 12 types, this is the big one, Melissa, the big thing. All of the personality types that we so famously associate with the signs and all of their faults and all their little comical traits are intimately linked with the body parts they rule and with the functions and glands of the body parts they're associated with. And this is just an amazing thing. And the book goes into this in great detail, also showing how astrology actually works. Actually, why is our body responding to planets?
What I found completely amazing about the book is that you really go into your approach of astrology, the lens of astrology. You even address the house systems question. You go into a little bit of background of medical astrology and the purpose of it. You really walk the reader through your methodology. And then when you go into the chapters, you not only talk about aspects and you talk about how the aspects would affect a sign and affect specific houses, but you also talk in depth about what is happening medically. You talk about the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, the central nervous system. You talk about like these bodily systems, and you're assigning different zodiacal rulerships to these body systems. And a lot of the ones that you've assigned are original. So yes, there are medical astrologers, historical medical astrologers that have assigned different body parts, and we utilize some of that. But back in those times, they didn't know about these microsystems that we have in our bodies, and these new, like they didn't know about the adrenal system and the sophistication by which our hormones are carried through the body. But now that we have this science, you're able to take the lens of modern science and your approach and your understanding of decades of studying astrology and medical astrology and doing readings, and you're able to give a definite assignment to parts of the body that were previously never assigned in medical astrology. So you're pioneering a new system, and you're completing it, or at least you're enriching it with new data that we never had before.
Well, we're trying to do that and opening the field for others to join in so that they might have different opinions. But yeah, you're right, Melissa. The ancients didn't know about the different parts of the brain and what they did. They didn't know about the nervous system. And so they assigned the blood to air signs and the lymph to water, when the blood is 60 to 80% water. Mm-hmm. But the movement of the blood is air signs, and the nervous system is air signs, but they didn't know about the nervous system. So they didn't know about so many things, or even what our organs actually did. So there's a lot of medical astrology that has not been assigned. It's an open field, and much that has.
Yeah. And this is very interesting because of all the medical terminology that you use, and because of your in-depth understanding. I mean, it could have been a medical textbook because of your understanding of the human body and the way that you've studied it. You're actually paving the way so that healthcare practitioners can start looking at their patients and their practice through the lens of medical astrology and start to see the full picture. What an X-ray won't show you, what you can actually see in a birth chart that the X-ray won't show you. And I just think that that's brilliant. I think right now you and I probably don't even understand. Like I'm a big picture person, and you are too. But I think even now, knowing that this book has broken a lot of ground in discoveries in what's been documented, I think this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how profoundly I think this book is going to impact not only astrology, but the field of medicine, that's what we're hoping to do, right? As medical astrologers, is branching out the field of medicine, collaborating more with healthcare practitioners, and reuniting the sciences again.
Yeah, I mean, it's the practitioner who's aware of zodiac sign syndromes can avoid a lot of mistakes and also do a lot of good, because they'll see into this person quickly and immediately and know, oh, this one, we shouldn't direct the radiation right to the head. Or this one, we need to warm them up, not heat them up. or oh, this one, it's all about the liver, or the problem is too much pulling inward and cold in the body. These old humors were thrown out, the old idea of temperature. So, in the book will be out in hopefully by February, if not January. I've been dealing with what I call cows in the road. Trying to get this.
Let's just hope it'll be out by Valentine's Day. We'll all have like a nice Valentine's Day, Valentine's gift.
Oh, sure.
Like here, like husband or wife. Here's a book. This is a section on you that I think you should read.
Well, the other thing is that all of the every chapter has sections that the complete beginner will understand. And then also the medical person will understand, and then the most advanced will understand. And we even begin each section with a little humorous portrait of, dining with the sign, the person of that sign or something like that.
Yeah, those are pretty good. I'm not going to lie. So actually, speaking of medical astrology and the fact that we're looking to bring back some of the way it was practiced, you're one of the few astrologers that really knows Renaissance astrology and how it was applied in the medical field. And you're coming out with 2 class series, which is the Renaissance. The Renaissance. Why can't I find my words? The Renaissance Practices of Medical Astrology. Let me make sure I have the full title right. I don't know why my brain is blanking right now.
Oh, it's okay. Too much EMF. It's the Renaissance medical techniques, but they are all based on horary and electional in this period. So everybody we should say Renaissance horary medical techniques, Renaissance electional medical techniques.
The Renaissance Techniques of Medical Astrology. Such a simple title and easy to remember.
It's true. And all the folks out there who love horary astrology and electional astrology, ancient astrology, because all these techniques go back to the Hellenistic period. Everybody loves medieval astrology. Everybody who loves Renaissance astrology will love this class and benefit from it. You don't have to be always focused on medicine, because these techniques are useful everywhere.
So how did the Renaissance or medieval astrologers use astrology as a primary medical tool? Because that's the focus of what of what the class is. So how did they integrate it? Like, how would you go into a physician's office? Like, what would that look like?
The physician would first try to obtain a natal chart, which they usually could not do. So they were dependent on what was called a decumbiture. And that was the chart that the person, when the person first went, oh my God, I don't feel well, and lay down. Now, if they could get the exact time of that was the preferred chart, because natal charts were almost impossible except when you were dealing with kings and queens. Now, however, if you could not get that, the second preferred was the time that the physician interviewed the patient, or the patient arrived at their office. Now, this technique is still used in several offices today. You do a consulting chart. It's a chart of the moment you meet. And now, if you cannot get that, the other preferred one, well, that was the third most preferred. The second was the presentation of the urine. Well, we don't do that today, because the essence of the person was thought to be carried in the urine. So the consult chart was the third most preferred and not considered as accurate, but it is what people can use. It's extremely valuable for all practitioners to be able to have consulting charts. We have some students, Melissa, that do use it in their medical practices.
I know, I've heard from them. I guess, so I'm going to put the lens on of a skeptic, right? So if you have 3 possible charts that you could look at, 1, the birthday, 2, the decumbrature chart, or 3, the consulting chart, how is it possible that they could all be accurate? Are they each telling you different information?
They are. And in fact, this class is going to be unique because we're going to compare 4 different masters of this art, and they give different rules. And I've been able to discover these through sifting through their material, which is just horribly edited in an old English, but through sifting through this material.
You speak old English, apparently.
Yeah, I've learned that F's look like S's, and there's some very strange language, but that there were different techniques used that got conflated over time. But a consulting chart, for instance, for the astrologers out there, if you're a doctor and someone comes in, you're the ascendant. The patient is the seventh house. For a decumbiture, person gets sick, they're the ascendant. They aren't thinking doctor at that moment. They're just thinking about themselves. It's completely intimate to them. It's not an interaction. Then they're the ascendant. The doctor becomes either the seventh or the 10th, depending on what system you're using. So you do have differences in how these are viewed and used. Absolutely. And they're seen. Another way to look at it, Melissa, is when you're doing real estate, the same thing happens. You can do a chart for the moment you first see the chart in the house in the paper, or your real estate agent calls you. But the actual best time is the strongest, and that's when you walk through the door of that house, the threshold for the first time. And so, but you can use any of these. They're different portraits. Think of a test tube in time. So everything in the universe is interconnected. So the moment a person gets sick, there's lots of influences coming in, and you take a test tube of time and you look at it. Now, I'm a great believer in natal charts. I have found them to be infinitely better than decumbiture. But this technique gives an up-close view, and it's very helpful to know these old techniques. It also helps us understand astrology and the history of it, and how we should be using our minds in analyzing and interpreting things.
We're losing touch with that more and more nowadays, which I think is why so many students are diehard Judith Hill fans, because they see that you give, you cite your sources. This is common in academia. And for so long, astrology was part of academia. And since it was kind of pulled away as a pseudoscience, people have gotten away from citing their sources. And now there's still a lot of astrologers that do cite their sources, but it's not as common a practice as it should be.
Oh, yeah, it's happening all the time. So my sources are going to be, I'm going to be using for you history buffs out there, I'm going to be using Richard Saunders, Joseph Blograve, who both had extensive diaries of their decumbitures, William Lilly, and Nicholas Culpeper. They all had a lot of, they did a lot of research, and some wrote medical diaries. And this is why the British period of the 1600s was the pinnacle of the art, because you had several of these diarists, and you had the Gutenberg's printing press. So
yeah,
able to publish their books, and they were all, some of them books are this thick, like Lilly's Christian Astrology. He has a big section on medical. But Saunders wrote a whole book on this art, as did Nicholas Culpeper. Blograve is my personal favorite. His book, Blograve's Physic, is amazing. But Saunders, I feel, thinks more the way I do with how he views decumbiture. He's not so strict rule-oriented. He looks at what's actually going on, and he sees if the shoe fits the foot. And he compares with other teachers and with the ancients. And he says, oh, this one's doing it wrong, or this is how it used to be done. And it's really great reading him if you can get through it.
It's like reading old-time gossip. Oh, throwing shade there. Oh, that's oh, because you imagine how scandalous it would have been at the time when someone is openly, knocking down someone else's theory in an area where people need to be politically correct and play nice in the sandbox. So.
Yeah, they didn't always play nice in those days, but I will be a tour guide through a lot of the differences in their techniques. Most people today are using Culpeper's techniques, and they're not the same as Saunders. He uses a completely different technique, as does Blograve. They have their own favorite methods, and they've all made discoveries. And they'll say, I have made this discovery. This is mine. And now it comes down to us as tradition. So it's just like if you did it.
We're now having to do that, by the way, because I've been on Judith. I was like, Judith, you need to start claiming your discoveries. So now Judith is starting to cite her discoveries. I mean, you were doing that before, but like, it's like, we're gonna like, you're one of them. You're one of the medical astrologers. You have discoveries, so we got to start citing you too. I'm always going to keep your horn.
I find my whole techniques and methods that I've written about are being taught everywhere, and I'm never cited. People think it comes from ancient Greece or something. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the Judith Hill method. But
it's embarrassing to have to do that, but yeah, we're almost having to do this now.
So, in terms of this class, we're going to be learning about Renaissance astrology. Some people call it medieval, some people call it ancient astrology. Who is the audience for this? Like, who are the types of astrologers that would get the most out of something like this? Obviously, someone who has an interest in medical astrology, right? Because this is with a focus on medical astrology. But beyond that, like, does it need to be an advanced astrologer? Does it need to be is it for everyone? Like, who would really get the most out of this course?
There's several. That's a great question, Melissa. And there's several groups. There, first of all, people who love horary astrology or electional astrology of any tradition, ancient Greek, medieval, Renaissance, will love this class, even though it is medical oriented. They're going to learn a lot of techniques and approaches. It's fascinating. It will always be useful. Secondly, all medical practitioners who love astrology, especially those that have practices and want a quick method, if they can't always legally. Hospital. I should just stay home. This technique will show you those things. Any astrologer who I would say is intermediate, you have to know your signs, your houses, your planets. You have to know your way around a chart a little bit. Be able to look at a chart. Oh, that's Mars in Aries. Oh, Mars is squaring Venus. Oh, there's Scorpio rising. You have to be able to understand those basics.
You have to have at least intermediate chart skills. Like, you need to be able to understand how to read a birth chart, and you need to understand some of these concepts that you're teaching. I mean, you're teaching new concepts, but in regards to being able to follow along, definitely know the glyphs, know what the houses represent, and be able to follow along when you start talking about zodiacal rulerships. Like that, I feel like you always talk us through, but like someone to be able to follow along and understand the concept that certain zodiac signs rule certain organ systems. The planets also have an influence on things, but there is the zodiacal influence.
That's correct. And then, however, it's a two-part class. The second class, beginners would understand. Advanced would understand. The second class is called the crucial circle. And that was their technique going back to ancient times, the Hellenistic period, as far as we know, of doing a chart for the moment the sickness began and being able to track it through the month or even the year as to if it's going to be extremely serious, potentially mortal, and the days of crisis or the days of that the person will rally or get better. Be able to track those, and anybody can learn that technique. Even the non-astrologer can learn that technique.
I love that. I love that. So we've never had a class like this before. There's classes that touch on some Renaissance techniques, but this one is specifically dedicated to these techniques. Why is it so important to discuss these techniques in relation to the entire field of medical astrology? Like, why is that branch so necessary to have to complete essentially your courses?
Yes, as we have identified at the Academy six, there's really seven, but I like the number six distinctive genres of medical astrology, and we offer them all at the Academy. But why is Renaissance techniques? Why are Renaissance techniques so important? And Renaissance techniques are also medieval techniques. They come from the Hellenistic period, but they were developed a little. They have their own flavor by this time. And we're citing these old texts. And they're so important because these techniques were the absolute main toolkit with herbalism and the examination of the patient and the urine of the entire medieval and Renaissance medical periods, the pinnacle being in about 15 and 1600s in England. And this was the medical system. It was called Astrological. And now medical astrology, there can be all different kinds. It can be just the moon phases or whatever. But Astrological was a system of medicine as sophisticated as Ayurvedic, as sophisticated as traditional Chinese medicine. And its great crown jewel was these techniques I'm going to be teaching. And so it's very important historically to use these. Many astrologers still use them. The modern period began, I feel, a superior, in my opinion, much easier to use type of medical astrology, which is using the natal chart with transits. But that doesn't mean these aren't very valuable techniques, especially in a consulting work, when you don't have time or access to a natal chart.
Yeah. No, that's great because a lot of people, especially the older folks I know, a lot of them, they don't have birth times. They have a rough estimate. Some people don't know what day they were born. If they were born out in the country and like some of that wasn't captured. I mean, these are people in their 80s, 90s, but some of them don't actually know their birthday.
That's very true. My own mother, she was born at home